Okay, so here we go with the 1976 Cincinnati Reds against the 1984 Detroit Tigers. Really felt like going into this series that the Cincinnati Reds were definitely the better Strat-O-Matic team. They definitely have the edge in starting lineup. There's really no holes in the lineup. They have power, speed, very good defense. There's no holes defensively with the 1976 Reds. Starting pitching, I would say, is probably a push. I would also say that the bullpen probably favors the Cincinnati Reds in terms of depth. However, what the Detroit Tigers do have going into this series, if everyone remembers 1984, Willie Hernandez Cy Young MVP, and really has one of the best Stratomatic cards I've ever seen for a relief pitcher. So let's get into game number one, where we had Jack Morris going up against Gary Nolan. And in the first game, the Detroit Tigers were able to hang on for a 6-5 victory. They jumped on Gary Nolan pretty quick, scoring 6 runs in 2 innings. One of the bigger hits was Chet Lemon with a two RBI triple in the top of the third to make the score 6-2. And from there, the Tigers were able to hold on. Brought Willie Hernandez in the bottom of the eighth inning, and he gave up a walk, home run, and a walk. All three of those base runners reached via the hitter's card. And then after that, Hernandez was able to shut them down, 6 up, 6 down. So Detroit takes the first game of this series. Okay, so moving on to game number two, we had Petrie going up against Billingham. The Reds were able to even up the series with a game 2 win. 8-6 was the final score. The big game was had by George Foster. 5 for 5 with a home run, two triples, and four RBIs. And just to give you an example of just how good that Cincinnati Reds lineup, George Foster was hitting six in that lineup. So Cincinnati able to take game number two. Eastwick was able to come in and close the door with 2 2/3 shutout innings out of the bullpen. So Cincinnati takes game number two. Moving on to game number three here, we got Don Gullett going up against Milt Wilcox. And this is really where I really felt going into the game Cincinnati had a definite advantage. Really liked having the two left-handers going in games 3 and 4 for the Tigers, going for the Reds in Detroit. Now, the 84 Tigers have a very good lineup against right-handed pitching, and I would say the lineup against left-handed pitching is just pretty good. Um, you insert Larry Herndon into left field. You got Barbaro Garby at DH. Darrell Evans stays in the lineup playing first base. However, his power is negated a little bit facing the left-hander. So let's get into game number three. And as you could see, the Cincinnati Reds took this one relatively easily by a score of 6-2. Don Gullett going 8 innings, only allowing 2 runs, 9 hits, 4 walks. Most of those base runners reached early in the game as he finished the game really strong, and had Raleigh Eastwick come in and close out the game after Darrell Evans led off the bottom of the ninth with a walk. Just figured, 4-run game, leadoff man reached, so don't mess around. Brought in the closer, and Eastwick was able to retire all three men that he faced. So Cincinnati takes game number three, and they are up 2 games to 1 going into game number four. Okay, so moving on to game number four now, we've got Jack Morris going on 3 days rest for the Detroit Tigers. He goes up against Fred Norman. And in this game, as you could see, Jack Morris is able to go 7 shutout innings with Willie Hernandez closing the door right behind him. I took Morris out after Foster led off the top of the seventh with a single. It was only a 3-0 game at that point, and as you could see, Hernandez was able to come in, get a double play, and then was able to close the door 2 innings for the save. The big hit in this game, Tom Brookins' two RBI triple in the bottom half of the fifth inning. So after 4 games, we have a 2-2 series between the 76 Reds and the 84 Tigers. Okay, so moving on to game number five now. Big swing game here with the series tied 2 games apiece. We got Gary Nolan going for the Reds, and we got Dan Petrie going on 3 days rest for the Tigers. And as you can see, Dan Petrie was able to give Detroit a solid outing, 6 innings, 1 run. The big sequence in this game was in the bottom half of the seventh inning, with the Reds holding a 2-1 lead with nobody out. Rupert Jones was able to reach on a error by Joe Morgan. And then what I did from there was I took Nolan out and brought in Sarmiento to pitch to Lemon. Chet Lemon promptly RBI double scores Rupert Jones, and then with 2 outs, Tom Brookins gets an RBI double that scores Chet Lemon. And in the eighth inning, brought in Willie Hernandez to close it, and he goes 2 scoreless innings, only allowing 1 hit. So after 5 games, we've got the '84 Tigers up 3 games to 2 on the 1976 Reds. So as you can see, a very competitive series as to be expected going in. Okay, so in game number 6, the Cincinnati Reds were able to break open a 2-2 game going into the bottom of the seventh by scoring 7 runs. The big hit in that inning was Pete Rose had a 3-run homer, and Dave Concepcion had a 2 RBI triple. So the 76 Reds take game number 6 to force a game number 7 by a final score of 9-5. And moving into game number 7, we've got really a terrific pitching matchup going into this game with Jack Morris pitching on 3 days rest for the second time in the series, and he's going up against Don Gullett. Now, I really felt going into this game that the Reds had a definite advantage going in with the lefty pitching game number 7, and as I stated before, the Tigers lineup is just okay against left-handed pitching, but not nearly as good as it is against right-handed pitching. And as you can see, the Tigers were able to break through with 5 runs in the top of the 5th inning. The big hit in that inning was Lance Parrish was able to come through with a 2-out grand slam to make the score 5-0. And then from there, the Tigers were pretty much able to cruise to a victory. Pulled Jack Morris after 6 innings as he was already in his point of weakness after that 6th inning and didn't want to mess around. Brought in Willie Hernandez, who is a 3-inning reliever. So Hernandez was able to come in, pitch 3 innings, allow 1 run on only 2 hits. So there we have it. The 1984 Tigers defeat the 1976 Reds in 7 games. And really the big standout performance in this series was from Willie Hernandez. 9 innings pitched, 3 earned runs allowed, 4 saves, only allowed 8 base runners in those 9 innings. So Willie Hernandez saves all 4 wins for the Tigers in this series. So there we have it. 1984 Tigers defeat the 1976 Reds. My next video will be on the 1986 Mets versus the 1998 New York Yankees.